Hello and welcome to IndieFilmopolis, a podcast dedicated to indie film and filmmaking. My name's Pugh, I'm an independent filmmaker and indie film enthusiast. In this episode I'll be chatting with up-and-coming filmmaker Bryson Sams about the making of his short film Projection, a 40-minute psychological thriller about a cinema projectionist's descent into madness as he grinds away the hours in the lonely dark corridors of his local multiplex theatre. Projection has already racked up close to 19,000 views and climbing steadily, which is no small feat for a 40-minute short film hosted on a platform crowded with short-form clickbait content. So, Bryson, thanks for joining me on this podcast. How's everything with you on your side of this Skype call?
Oh, well, we're all in lockdown. Stay at home. It's just the way it is at the moment, all around the world. But hey, it's a great time to, work on film and, self-meditate on everything that's going on. Fingers crossed everything will be better soon. So
Absolutely. So, just to give a bit of context then, where are you based and what's the film and TV industry like where you are?
Well, I live in Franklin, Tennessee. It's like a small town right outside of Nashville in the United States. I'm in film and television. Obviously in the United States, it's an enormous industry. And, the independent film industry is pretty much booming here. There's a lot of people here that have a lot of things to say and a lot of visions to promote. And that's really one of those things that is really great about where I live. There are a lot of filmmakers that I know that come around my area and they all have some great visions. And, I love working with them and I love watching their work. And it's really, really good to see everyone flourish.
That's fantastic. So like you mentioned, you're on lockdown, the whole world's on lockdown, and everyone's binge watching movies and TV shows, and I've been catching up with a lot of short films, and one that caught my interest was your short film Projection. So to get everyone up to speed, how would you pitch Projection?
If I were to pitch Projection, it is a short film about a character named Daniel. He's almost 19 years old, but he hasn't really started out great in his adulthood, and he's tried a few jobs and nothing really works, and so he ends up stumbling onto this theater job as a projectionist, and the GM's a dick, and the main manager's a dick as well, and everyone's big old dick, and it's one of those things where essentially he goes insane. The isolation as a projection, in the projection, he's sort of going crazy. So that's my elevator pitch for Projection.
That's great. So it's very much a film, I'd say, open for interpretation, and I sent you my take on the film, and I'm eager to know more about your thought process behind it. But aside from the elevator pitch, what do you want people to know about the film going into it?
I've made quite a lot of films. This film, it was kind of hold a special place in my heart. It's one of those things where I want people to take something away from it. I mean, that's kind of like every filmmaker's goal, in my opinion. Yeah. Every filmmaker, they want anyone to pull something away from their creation. And, with Projection, I want someone to take something away from it, no matter what that is. And, the tagline for the film is, what do you think is real? It definitely promotes that whole essence of everyone taking their own take on it, I guess, if that's a good way to word it.
Yeah. So what was your inspiration for the film? Where did that come from?
The theater that we filmed in is actually the one that I'm employed at. I'm a manager there. Okay. And we actually, in the upstairs projection halls, obviously we have to take care of, lots of guest concerns, lots of different things. One of the main things that we have to work on is, projectors, because our building is a little bit older. It's a 20-plex. So, I mean, it's a big building, and we got a remodel, but the actual theaters and all the projectors, they're not super up to date. So whenever it comes to the older ones, I mean, there's a lot of maintenance up there. And so obviously we have to spend a lot of our time upstairs, where all the offices are and everything. And there's a line in the movie, where you have to keep the lights off as to not to disturb the guests. Yeah. And that's a very true fact. And it's a little unfortunate because our building is actually haunted.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, no, I've legitimately, the people, I've seen some stuff, and other people before me and after me, some people that hadn't even, spoken to each other really, they all have experienced similar, if not the same things. One of the most prominent figures and, entities that they've seen was a tall man, a tall, dark, shadowy figure wearing a top hat. Yeah. And that was a legitimate thing that people had seen. And I saw something very similar, and it's just one of those things. I mean, we all have decided, we all kind of thought, is it even real? All that sort of stuff. And, I remember one night, I mean, typically there's a lot of late nights. Yeah. And when one of those late nights, we had seen a lot of different things, and, we decided to just go to Waffle House and eat something at 3 a.m. And we were sitting there and we were talking about it, and Tucker Vaughn, the lead actor, he actually worked there at the time. And, I was sitting there with Tucker Vaughn and Scotty Demorest. We just kind of came up with the idea, what if we made a film, about projection, about what it would be like to work up there. And then, immediately my mind started racing, and it was one of those things where, I went home and was really thinking about it, and I couldn't sleep that night, actually, because I was sitting there thinking about all these things that we had seen, all ththese things that we had experienced. And, I was really looking for my next project because, not to get off topic, but I had just come off of Captain Franklin, and I had just gotten off of that, and I was looking for something different. And I had not tackled horror yet. I mean, I had done it, for a 54-hour film fest, but, there's a reason that's not on the internet. And, it's one of those things where I really felt like this was there was just a calling. Yeah. It was just one of those things where, it was just too perfect for you not to kind of try at. So, I immediately started writing and started thinking through the characters and what that would all mean. What would it be like to work as a projectionist? And obviously in the real world, we know what that's like, in our industry. Yeah. But, what would it be like, in a fictional world, in a theater that's even more run down, in a theater that they're constantly cutting the budget. And, what would it be like whenever you're alone upstairs constantly? We actually do have, even though, the managers and the supervisors at this building take care of all the projectors, we also do have a dedicated projectionist as well. And, we always joke about how he's alone all the time, and he's, not doing so hot sometimes, because sometimes he'll just be sitting there in the dark. Like, he won't turn the lights on when he's working on the projectors. Yeah. And, we'll go up to him and, we'll be like, he'll scare us because he'll just be standing there, outside of a projector. And he's like, oh, hey, how you doing? We're like, oh, well, doing great. Didn't see you there. You kind of scared the piss out of me. So, it's just one of those things. It was just overall that's really where the inspiration lied. And the writing process actually took quite a bit of time because it took a while to kind of nail the character. Sure. Because, especially for a projection, which is a character-driven film, it's one of those things where you really have to nail down, as hard as you can, what it means to be the character. And, like, if you were to be living in the character's skin, what would that mean? What are the ins and outs? And, from the beginning, I knew where I wanted it to begin, and I knew where I wanted the character to go. But, finding that journey from the beginning to end was always a little bit of a hassle. So, yeah, that's pretty much it. And then that writing process took about a month and a half of just constant writing, maybe a little bit longer. There was a lot of revisions. It was an ordeal, but I'm really glad we got it done.
That's incredible. I never thought for one second that there might have been any kind of real life inspiration behind that film, but that's it's interesting that there is. Yeah. So did you find yourself going mad yourself walking around those corridors, working there?
Well, at the time I was a supervisor during the course of that. And so, typically whenever your supervisor's there, the manager's also there. I'm a manager now, but, especially like after projection and everything, surprisingly afterwards, we weren't really super scared upstairs. Right. Like, we were more comfortable. Because, after spending so much time up there, after, doing all the things that are associated with projection, with the lights off and everything, we just got more comfortable for whatever reason. And, back then, whenever I was a supervisor, I wasn't really alone upstairs that often, just because, typically, that's you and the manager. We don't really go mad up there. I think we all kind of get used to it, and, we definitely get super scared sometimes. There's one time we were doing a midnight movie. This was before projection. I think this was, leading up to that Waffle House time that I was talking about. Yeah. Everyone was in the theater. They were getting ready to start the show. And, I went upstairs to start the movie, like, on the projector. And I was walking down, and there, there's not many lights on. There might be one light facing against a wall or, that sort of thing. I saw my shadow on the wall. And then I saw another shadow behind me. Right. And the thing is that, like, sometimes, if there's two lights, you can kind of create a double shadow, and that's just kind of the way the lighting works. Yeah. And I was like, oh, that's what it is. But then I started staring at it, and I realized that I was moving and my arms were moving, but the shadow behind me, it was not moving. Creepy. Okay. It was just kind of like floating directly behind me, and I started sprinting a little bit, and I ran, turned on the movie, and one of the events in the film actually is, or at least part of the montage, is directly inspired by that event, because he's in that exact hallway, and all that sort of stuff that I did, he sort of does in that moment. There's a lot of things inspired by reality there. And yeah, not to get into too many spoilers, but in the beginning, he sees the reflection of the top hat ghost, or the apparition, as we call it. He sees the reflection of it right behind him in that little porthole. And I've seen that, and multiple others have seen that as well. And most of us have gone over to that again and have seen that porthole, and we look for it every time that we walk past it, and it's not there. Crazy. But it was there that one time that we looked for it. So
is there any weird history with that building, or?
We don't really know too much about it. As far as history goes, there's only one thing that we've heard of. And there's multiple apparitions in the theater. There's the top hat ghost, which I've mentioned, which is the most prominent. Yeah. And then there's also what people call the beast, which is a dog-like entity. Okay. And there was actually one time, I wasn't working there at this time, but it was years ago. The entire Theater 5, which was, it's one of our really huge theaters,
Mm-hmm.
everyone came out saying that someone let a dog loose in there.
Right.
And so everyone was like, that's weird. And, some of the managers went in there, and they went in there shortly before that or after that or whatever, and they ended up hearing like scratching and barking on the walls and all those things whenever there was nothing in there. So there's that one, and then there's also a little girl named CJ. That's another one of the ones.
Okay.
And that girl loves this one hallway, which actually that entire hallway is painted black,
Right.
like in the hall, like in the walls and everything. So I mean, you walk into that hallway and it's just pitch black. It's just a tunnel of darkness. I've had other experiences with that one. Me and Scotty Demorest, someone that I mentioned earlier, we ended up having this one like experience where he saw a face like on one of the pillars on the wall.
Right.
And he kept looking for it, and he could not find it. He couldn't find it after he saw it, and he said that it seemed like it had appeared out of nowhere.
Okay.
I could go on and on and on about different things that he had seen.
Sounds like you got a whole feature film's worth of scares there.
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, we definitely pulled some of the coolest ones for the actual film.
Yeah.
Obviously, a lot of creative input was taken as far as kind of building the way that everything looks, because
Sure.
the film gets a lot more dramatic than it actually was,
Mm-hmm.
as you can imagine. But to answer the question about the history of the building, the only thing that we know is there was another theater which has now been turned into a mall, and that theater had CJ, that little girl ghost.
Right.
And one of the managers over there, they would literally be one of those things where whenever they would have like a late night screening, there was this one chair that girl always loved to sit in.
Right.
And if you didn't put it down for her, that chair would go down on its own.
Okay.
And then whenever that theater was going to be moved, that general manager over there asked CJ if she wanted to come with her to the theater that I work at now. Supposedly she followed, and we've had lots of sightings. There haven't really been that many sightings downstairs after the remodel, so it's really one of those things. But yeah, aside from that, that's really all we know about the history.
That is absolutely crazy. That's nuts. So loads of real life inspiration going into it then, but on an aesthetic level, there's loads of references to other films. There's some clear Kubrick references, other films like Shawshank, and there's some really great sound design elements to it and some real great atmospheric elements with the cinematography. What and who were your inspirations for the film on an artistic level?
On an artistic level, absolutely The Shining. I feel like that was a given. Every time that I read a comment that says, this seems inspired by The Shining, this seems inspired by, this or that or the other, like The Shining always sticks out to me because I'm like, yes, you got it. Thank you. I love Stanley Kubrick, love 2001. I love all of his other films, and, The Shining really sticks out to me quite a lot, even though I know Stephen King hates that movie.
Right.
But that's a whole other topic. But, the opening shot, which you had mentioned in your breakdown, it was heavily inspired by The Shining. There's like a little windy road outside the theater.
Cool.
And I was like, that's the opening shot. You're driving up for your interview. I flew a drone, and that was it. It's one of those things where we really wanted to kind of parallel the descent into madness, and that was really a very important aspect.
Yeah.
This was also one of the first films that I had worked on in recent history that was really all me whenever it comes to the pre-production process. I mentioned, with Captain Franklin and all my other past films, really just one of my partners. He's always been a co-director, and his name's Porter Edwards. Giving him a quick shout out. He's always, worked very diligently, on all the films that we've worked on together. We've been through a lot with, the film industry, and this was the first. He actually was studying in Chicago,
right,
at the time of this filming. So, aside from a quick text here and there, like it was one of the first projects where I kind of worked on it all on my own. So it was a little bit daunting, always having like that co-director, that person to kind of bounce ideas off of.
Sure.
And then this time was like the first time that I had done it on my own in a long time. It was a daunting task, and so that's why the inspirations and all those things all the studying that I had to do beforehand, writing all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
That's why that was so important to me. And The Shining is definitely the biggest inspiration. And I've seen some people make parallels to like Taxi Driver.
Yeah.
You made a parallel to Taxi Driver as well. I've seen a lot of people make other references to that, and Shawshank because of the ink spots and all that sort of stuff. Whereas, The Shining was the main inspiration, especially with, a guy descending into madness.
Yeah.
Or descending into madness, rather. There's a lot of parallels there.
Fantastic. So you touched on the fact that you were a manager. So I guess it didn't take you too much hassle to secure that location. But you got a small cast and it's one location.
Yes.
But it's almost 40 minutes long. Did you have to raise a budget to make the film, or were you pulling in favors?
As far as getting the location, that was just the general manager of the theater. He was just very, very gracious in, letting us pursue this film. I came to him with the idea. One day that we were slow, I talked to him, and I said I wanted to make this film. and I wanted to do this, and he said, yeah, I have no problem with that, and that'd be awesome. And
that's cool.
I also said I want you to be in it.
Okay.
And so,
cool.
the general manager in the film is actually the general manager, and he did a phenomenal job. I knew that he only had a few scenes in there because he's a busy guy, and he was very, very excited to be in it, and he loved seeing the final product. And it was one of those things where it was just kind of a group effort for sure. And you were talking about budget.
Yeah.
Aside from buying a pack of cigarettes and buying tons of fuel for that Zippo lighter,
right?
I think we went through about 1.5 bottles of Zippo fuel for that. It's quite a lot. I mean, that thing just burns through fuel anyways, but I mean, you got to think long takes of him just leaving it on, it's going to burn through it. But aside from that, cigarettes and occasional extra items that I wanted to add to my arsenal of film materials, really there wasn't much of a budget for projection.
That's good.
Yeah, I mean, that's just really because Tape Slate Productions and the company that Porter and I have built, we just have a lot of stuff that we've accumulated over time, and it really helps whenever we're making films, because if there is a budget, we primarily spend it on props for the film or that sort of stuff,
right?
And not really having to worry about purchasing any more gear or renting gear or anything like that because of the stuff that we have on hand.
Great. So on a technical level then, what equipment did you have at your disposal?
Well, we shot all of projection on a Sony a6500.
Yeah.
And we typically shot it in 35mm prime.
Nice.
There was the occasional 24mm Rokinon. That was another one that we used. But primarily we shot it that way. And one of the biggest problems with the setup, the one thing that I would change if I went back, is the 35mm prime on the Sony. Like the Sony A series cameras, they have phenomenal autofocus, but nonetheless you kind of have to learn how to tell the camera what to look at. And whenever you're using a gimbal and you don't have a manual rack focus on there, or a manual follow focus on there, like you do run into the issues of the film getting out of focus. And if I were to look back on projection, that would be the number one thing that I would change. I have the gear to do that, manual follow focus on the gimbal
right
now, but at the time I didn't have that. And even though I love the look of the 35 prime, I would probably rely a little less on autofocus looking back on it.
Yeah.
Primarily just because I know that there's a lot of times where you lose some very important aspects of the performance. And I take full responsibility for that one, just because I was the one running the camera and doing all that sort of stuff. So it's one of those things where it's one of those, every single film that I've ever done and every single film that I've worked on with other people, there's always a learning curve, and there's always something that you take away from it that you don't want to do next time, and things that you want to do next time.
Absolutely.
And I think that's probably the biggest takeaway from projection. Aside from the stuff that I really felt passionate about, there was also some things that I took away that were very beneficial for, I feel like, the future of my film career.
So you mentioned Tucker Vaughn before.
Yes.
And I thought he was fantastic in this film. What was your process working with him as an actor? Is he a natural, or did you have to sort of torture him Kubrick style to get that performance out of him?
There was definitely direction involved, but I've worked with Tucker multiple times. We've known each other all of our lives. Our parents were friends before we actually got born, and we're essentially brothers. He's one of the big reasons I got into filmmaking in the first place. And we just kind of have a really good dialogue whenever it comes to working on set, because we had done it so many times. And even with him, like, this was his first role that he really wanted to dive into. He read the script and he said that he wants to pursue acting.
Right.
So as far as projection goes, he really wanted to dive into the character, and it was actually his choice. I recommended buying herbal cigarettes, what most actors use on film sets.
Yeah.
So they don't kill their lungs. It was his choice to use just normal Marlboro Lights. Just, he wanted to use those because he felt like it was more authentic to the character.
Proper method actor then.
Oh yeah, for sure. He's not, as far as, Jared Leto Joker, like, he's not as far as that, fully being the character 24/7, but whenever he was on set, he was a real pro. He was an absolute pro, and I really don't think the film would have worked without him, to be honest. There was a little bit of direction here and there, but primarily he carried himself.
Fantastic.
Because he sort of built this character up in his mind, and all it really took whenever it comes to direction is sort of setting the stage, telling him what's going on, how he feels, and I would sometimes even say, like, what would Daniel do? What would Daniel do? And then sometimes that would just be enough to kind of tip him over the edge that I needed him to. Really, whenever it comes to some of the really intense scenes, we only did a few takes, just primarily because I would tell him, this is what's happening. This is, I'm setting the stage, I'm setting the scene. And, he would do it. And then I would say, that was, really, really good, but I want you to descend a little bit more into madness. Not to give away any spoilers or anything for those who haven't seen the film, but at the very end, that scene really only took two takes.
Really?
I actually, one of my most favorite things that I've ever seen in my life is Breaking Bad.
Sure.
And I don't know if you've seen Breaking Bad or not, but there's,
of course,
there's a the episode Crawl Space at the very end. I think that's one of the best performances on TV ever. He was actually in the middle of watching Breaking Bad at the time, and I said, once you get to that episode, I want you to just kind of study that. So I told him kind of what I wanted, and I sort of said, I mean, this is your last straw. You've tried everything. You thought this was going to work, and then you realize that you were played, and all of those emotions sort of pile up on top of you, and this is the end for you, and you know that. And he delivered masterfully. Like he did it once, and of course, like afterwards, he's laying on the ground, out of breath, and super tired because it was 6 a.m.
Yeah.
And he looks at me and he said, "How was that?" And I say, "It was perfect. Like it was spot on, exactly what needed to happen." So he did a masterful job, and the film would not have been the same without him. And it's definitely not the last. It's definitely not the last project that I will be doing with him. We actually already have a few more planned this year, and I'm really looking forward to working with him again.
So you mentioned that you were filming at 6 a.m. I never even thought about this. So you're working at the theatre. It's a operational theatre at the time you're filming. So when did you get the time to film there?
After we closed, I typically would work 5 to 6 days a week, depending. And once we're done, we're closed. Everyone goes home, and then we essentially just kind of sit there, and I get everything ready, and then around 2 a.m. that's whenever we would start, because once everyone's gone, I mean, it can be late nights on the weekends. Then after that, we start filming, and that specific scene from the ending, all that stuff right there, like we filmed. I mean, it was like some of the most crucial scenes of the film. I mean, it took us several hours to film that and to get it just right. Yeah. Even though there was only a few takes per, like there was just a lot that went into it nonetheless. Essentially those scenes, like we were there till 6 a.m. and that was the last scene that we had shot that night or that morning, however you look at it. Mm-hmm. And I remember as we were leaving, the opening manager was coming in. He was like, "Why are you guys still here?" So, it was definitely an ordeal. But I mean, I still don't think I would change it, just because it did kind of add that little bit of edge, because we were all tired, and even though we were all tired and wanting to sleep,
of course, yeah.
I mean, I don't think anyone would change the way that it went down, because it just kind of added more of that authenticity of just the creation of the film. And I mean, when Tucker looks tired, or when Daniel looks tired and looks like he's beat, he really is. Yeah. And whenever at the end of the film he looks like he's had a long month, it's because he really had a long month, and he was definitely bringing a lot in from reality into the film, which kind of makes it even more authentic in my opinion.
Sure. I mean, this reminds me totally of Clerks, where Kevin Smith was doing day shifts in his convenience store and then shooting it at night. Were you coming off a shift at the theatre and then going straight into shooting?
Absolutely. There were some days where I would have my day off. I'd spend most of that day sleeping, getting ready for the night, and then also doing some pre-production work, just making sure everything was set right before the film. And it was one of those things where I would come off shift, my gear would be in our poster room locked up, and then I would whip it all out with the batteries charging, put all the batteries in, say let's go. And that was the way that worked. So
cool.
It was definitely a grueling time, but like I said before, I would not change a tiny bit of that. I feel like it went perfectly.
Yeah, I think it probably added to it more than anything.
Oh, yeah.
So what was your schedule like then? How many days did you film? Did you have to go back and refilm anything?
We didn't actually have to do any refilming. The schedule was a little weird, though. We would typically film on the weekends and, during the week as well. All the stuff with Tucker, we got out of the way first because, I mean, he's the main character of the film. There's not a scene without him. And, all of those scenes we primarily filmed ahead of time. It was really coordinating with Chandler, who plays Travis, and Iggy, who plays Iggy. It was really coordinating with them that, the reason why the filming wasn't done sooner. Everyone's extremely busy around that time of year. So, it's one of those things where we just had to make the best of it and, try to get it done as soon as possible. And, I had made mistakes in the past of, saying the film would be done by this day and saying the film would be released on this day. I feel like, a lot of filmmakers have had that where they're like,
sure, yeah,
oh, yeah, this film will be out and ready to go by December 29th. But, in fact, I'm very happy that I did this. I said this film is going to be ready on January 3rd, 2020. And, I released the final trailer with that. And that was after we had already filmed everything. And, I felt very comfortable with that because, a bulk of the editing was done. And it was really just a matter of all the fine details and, doing ADR and, stuff like that. So the actual filming schedule, it was not very strict. It wasn't one of those things where like we would try to, plan this stuff at least a week in advance. Yeah. For the most part. There were definitely the occasional like, oh, can we film tomorrow? One of those things. But the scheduling wasn't as organized as you may think. And, it's something that, I'll fess up to. It was a lot that went into the film. And, I'm very happy that it ended up working out as well as it did, in my opinion.
Cool. So you probably touched on this already, but what do you consider to be the highs and the lows of the shoot for you?
Well, definitely the ending.
Uh-huh.
It was definitely one of the highs. And, there's a lot of different parts of the film that I watch, and I just feel like they still touch me, I guess, to this day. Like I look back on them for, more than just me watching the film, just the fact that we were able to accomplish it with just, such a short crew.
Mm-hmm.
And, I was the crew. So, whenever it's just me, Scotty and Tucker on set, most of those nights, the fact that we were able to get it done to the scale that we were able to, it was just one of those things where, that's one of the highest points of all the filming, in my opinion.
Yeah.
The lows would definitely be the audio. And I wouldn't even call like the audio one of those things where it wouldn't be like the low of production. But I mean, if I would say like one of the biggest things that I would change, aside from the autofocus that I mentioned earlier, is the audio. Most of the film takes place upstairs in projection, and obviously we can't turn off all the projectors.
Of course.
The projectors have to stay on, and they're very noisy.
Yeah.
They're very noisy, and so whenever you're walking around trying to get dialogue and stuff like that, like I knew it was going to be an issue, and I should have used lavalier mics, but I did not. I just used a shotgun mic because obviously I didn't have a boom. I didn't have someone to hold it or anything like that. So I did the best that I could in that moment. But looking back afterwards, having to do all the ADR and stuff. And, still a lot of the complaints about the film are, the ADR, and, how some things don't necessarily match and that sort of stuff. And that's one of those, I would say that's definitely the lowest point of the film, in my opinion.
To be honest, I actually thought that added to the surreal element of the film. I almost thought it was a deliberate choice.
It definitely was after watching the initial audio.
Yeah.
I did mention multiple times on set that we will likely not use any of this audio. But I mean, I definitely tried just, to not have to stress anyone out of, coming over to my place and,
sure,
filming the ADR. So, once we actually had to do the ADR, that was one of those things where I definitely wanted to ensure that the audio sounded great. And I feel like it did work out, but some people just weren't a fan. And like I said, that was definitely my lowest point.
It worked for me.
Well, I'm very happy. And, there's other people that enjoy it as well, but I'm acknowledging that the criticism that the ADR is not the best. But even though I feel like it works, and there's definitely some things that I would do differently. Yeah. But it's definitely the best with what we had.
So did you release this film straight onto YouTube?
Yes, the initial trailer came out, I want to say it was late October to early November, and we actually hadn't finished shooting at that time, and it was just like some of the original footage that we had shot. Yeah. The initial actual trailer, and I believe that was in the middle of December, to maybe late November, around there, and that was whenever we actually had all the footage filmed, and it was really just a matter of getting it edited and completed, and that was the time that I put the release date on it.
Cool. So what I find really interesting about new filmmakers coming up at the moment is they're kind of quite happy to get their films straight out onto the internet, whereas when I was coming up making short films and stuff, you went through the festival route, and it was sort of like a big no-no to put stuff online. But at the moment, new filmmakers are like, yeah, whatever, just let's get it out as soon as possible. What's your thought on the digital route versus the film festival route?
Well, I still plan on, submitting projection to some film festivals. I know that some don't allow you to, or they don't allow you to enter the films if it's already been released. Yeah. I know that that's some of the stipulations in some of the film festivals. But, it's just one of those things where I feel like the main reason why filmmakers make films, especially independent filmmakers, because it's not like, we're making money off of the films. I mean, you're doing it off your leisure. You're doing it because that's what you love to do. Yeah. And you're really doing it because that's what you want to do in your life. So whenever you're posting, just a film to YouTube, I mean, it's really all just about entertainment. And yeah, if you get in, to a film festival that could, accelerate your career possibly, in some ways. And that definitely, that definitely is something that I'm going to do. But, around the time of release for projection, it was one of those things where one of my most important aspects of it was just making sure that everyone got to see it. Sure. I mean, because we did kind of develop a fan base, ahead of time. There were a lot of people really excited. They knew what we were working on, and they were really excited to see the fruits of everything that we had been doing. And Tape Slate Productions at the moment is here to entertain. We're here to make content that people enjoy. And we're really here to, just because we have a film that we're holding on to, I mean, I still plan on releasing it as opposed to, waiting for a film festival at the moment. And that's, especially with the time of projection, I would have had to have waited, 9 months or more to release it. And absolutely, there definitely will be some films that are going to be planned for those festivals. But, at the moment and at the time of projection being created, that was definitely, the route that we wanted to take.
So what is it up to now? 18, 19,000 views?
Yeah, it actually, and I'm very proud of the amount of views on there. I feel like all of us are, everyone that took any sort of part in the film. I feel like everyone is, super proud, because previously on the Typeset Productions YouTube channel, the most viewed film had 2,000 views. And it was actually my very first film that I had posted on there, which I do not recommend you watch at all. Yeah. That's a whole other story. Maybe another podcast. We'll see.
Yeah, okay.
I won't get into that now. But, whenever I posted projection, it was one of those things where I was kind of crossing my fingers, really hoping that it would pass that film.
Yeah.
Because I no longer wanted that one sitting at my most popular upload.
Sure.
And then once it did, I was like, all right, cool, that's it. We did it. That was it. And then I sat back and honestly didn't look at the view count for a few days. Because, those first several weeks, I was just kind of watching it like a hawk, really wanting it to, kind of past that. And then I didn't. And then I remember, Tucker messaged me and he said, have you looked at the views? Oh, wow, it's at 4,000? That's insane. Wow. And then it went up to 4,500 and we're like, oh, that's awesome. And then went up to 5,000. We're like, oh, wow, that's crazy. And, in the grand scheme of things, like, 5,000 views is it has no comparison to, some of those films that have millions and millions and millions of views.
Yeah.
And, on YouTube, it's a very small count relatively, but whenever you look at the analytics and you see that around 50 to 70% of the people actually watch it all the way, let's just say 50%, that's 5,000 people. That's literally 2,500 people that have watched your film all the way and have taken that time out of their day. And that, whether they were entertained, not entertained, nonetheless, they watched it and they came for what they wanted. And that's, a very important thing to me. And, now that we're looking at, once it crossed the 10,000 view mark, and you have to think in that rule of 50%, that's still 5,000 people that have watched it all the way through. And it's
amazing.
It's amazing. So
yeah, you can't even compare that to film festivals, really, because
right.
if you're being realistic, at a film festival, you got like a couple of dozen people
right
sitting watching your film, and the huge advantage of releasing stuff straight online is you've still got that enthusiasm behind it. I think at the moment, releasing stuff online for short films is probably absolutely the best way to go, and just get it out there, get that immediacy of response.
Right. And reactions are definitely the best part, and I'm very happy to look at the comment section of projection every day. Some people don't have some great things to say, and a lot of it's very constructive. So I'll read it, move on. That's the way it is. But then there's a lot of people that are, like I said in the very beginning, like making comparisons to The Shining and doing all those different things, and reading people analyze the video in the way that I had envisioned it. It's really one of those things that I'm magnificently excited about. It brings a smile to my face and sometimes a tear to my eye every time I look at the comment section and see people just analyzing it, not even saying praises, just saying I think this happened. It really makes me excited, and it means that it impacted them enough to go into the comment section of my video and talk about it there. I don't know, it's just maybe it's a little weird, but that's how I see it, and it's really exciting.
No, totally. I don't think you can compare that to the film festival, really.
Yeah.
So perfect. So I think you've probably touched on this already. What was the biggest lesson that you learnt working on this film?
I feel like one of the biggest things for pre-production, writer's block sucks. We all know that, and it wouldn't be the first time that I learned that. With pre-production, that was probably the biggest thing, and just kind of keep moving forward, know where you're beginning, know where you're ending, know where you kind of want to be around in the middle, and we just kind of go from there. And then during the actual principal photography stage, autofocus, not something that you should trust for the most part. And that's obviously that, but really I learned a lot about how to talk to talent, and how to work with people that know how to convey themselves on the screen. And that was just that was one of the biggest takeaways for sure. And how well, in my opinion, a project can turn out once the actor is giving me their all. That was an enormous takeaway from that, for sure. Being able to stretch Tucker to the limit in some ways, it was a really, really, fantastic thing to see, and it was a fantastic thing to, be a part of, and to be able to kind of coach those little tiny emotions. Is very important. So, and then as far as post-production goes, really just take the time on the little details. Because at the end of the day, those little details, even though you may not even notice them, the regular viewer may not notice them, like, they're there. And then maybe one of the 15,000 of the people that have watched it will see it. And then that one person will be affected by those little tiny changes that you made. So, definitely revisions, and, going through your film 10, 20, 30, 100 times, just to get those little tiny minute details in there, and that's very, very important.
Yeah.
And actually, there's a lot of scares that I would probably bet that you didn't see just in the film. There's a lot of things that there's a few little nods, just things in the background of some really short shots that you probably didn't notice were even there. I don't think anyone's seen it in the YouTube video. So of course I've told the cast and crew that they're there, and they're like, oh, what? I didn't know that was there. That's insane. I feel like all of it just promotes that mood of eeriness that we had kind of promoted throughout the whole film.
Awesome. So what and who inspired you to get into filmmaking? Who are your favorite filmmakers, and what are the movies that inspired you?
Well, my favorite movie is Interstellar by Christopher Nolan.
Nice.
Ironically, I haven't made a sci-fi yet, like a space sci-fi thriller or anything like that. But, nonetheless, Christopher Nolan has always impacted me. Inception is a phenomenal film. Interstellar is, a great look into the characters. And he really knows how to write characters, and he really knows how to write people from beginning to end and kind of show their decisions and, all those sort of things that make us excited as filmmakers, being able to tell those stories. And, he's a masterful director, and I'm super excited for Tenet, and I really hope it does not get pushed. I really actually like Edgar Wright as well. Obviously like, a lot of filmmakers, and I feel like I'm giving some very basic answers, but I mean, those are the people that inspired me. I look at their work and, I kind of aspire to be like that someday.
So aside from Interstellar, from Nolan's arsenal, what's your favorite film?
Aside from Interstellar, it would definitely be Inception. And I actually haven't seen all of his films. I'm working on it. That's probably a little shameful to say, but I haven't seen all of his films, and I still plan on it, and I've seen a majority of them. I just haven't seen Memento.
That's a must.
Yeah.
Absolute must.
Oh, yes. Yes, yeah. And I know it was also early in his career, too. So.
And The Following as well. Have you seen that?
I have not seen The Following, actually.
Yeah, you've got to check that one out.
I definitely will.
That's brilliant. Fantastic. Okay, so aside from Projection, you've got a whole bunch of films online. What are the films, aside from Projection, that you want other people to check out?
Well, definitely don't check out the second most popular video on my page. Do not do that. That's my first film. But, all jokes aside, I sort of started my filmmaking journey. This is kind of sidetracking a little bit, but I started my filmmaking journey, like I said, with Tucker. We were about 9, and he brought Goosebumps, R.L. Stine's Goosebumps over, and he was like, hey, man, I love Goosebumps. We should make Goosebumps. So we did like a little bit of a remake of Goosebumps, and I won't go into too many of the details. There's also a reason that's not online anywhere. It's really awful. Really terrible. But I mean, from that day on, I really, to kind of make a short version of the story, like from that day on, I really enjoyed doing that. I never really thought it would be a career, but I knew that I really enjoyed doing film. I really started taking film professionally back in 2015. And, 2015, we started with Quantum, which there's a lot of learning experiences from that. And it was a little superhero short film, was not very good, and move on from that. But I also made a Star Wars parody, which the first one isn't very good either. It's really not. Pretty bad, actually. I would say it's worse than Quantum. After I made those films, I looked back on them and I kind of realized what had kind of gone wrong in those films. And also what went right. Like some things that I enjoyed, and then some things that maybe could have gotten a lot better.
Of course, yeah.
And so I started kind of going into the sequel territory. Not necessarily because I wanted to, cash in on the ultimate success of the 200 views that the first one got, not because of that. I feel like there was, it's a short story, it's a short film, and then you're sitting there and you have your film that's 5 minutes long, and then you start thinking about all these other things that you could have done, and you start thinking about all the different things that you want to do still. At least in my opinion, whenever I make sequels, which I ended up making a sequel to both Quantum and Sign Wars, which was the name of the Star Wars parody, I ended up making a sequel to both of them, and I feel like both of them are tens of times better than the originals. And so I would say if there's anything that you would check out today, if you want to see the very beginning, go ahead and check out Quantum 2. Not Quantum. Do not watch that one. Unless you do and you just want to laugh, go ahead. And then I would say Sign Wars 2 as well. We're actually working on a Sign Wars 3 right now with Tucker and myself, and we're kind of doing the finale. Actually, there's already a teaser on the channel. If you want to go check that out, it's like a little announcement teaser. So everyone at Tapeside has grown so much since the very beginning, and we always love trying to do better every single time, just trying to see what we did wrong in the last and trying to improve on it in the next. And I feel like it really has worked out in the grand scheme of things. So I mean, even though those first 2 films that were made, I didn't think they were the best, there's a reason they're still up on the internet. It's primarily just because I feel like it's cool to see the growth from the beginning to end. And obviously we're going to keep going on for, several years. And it's really cool to see from the beginning to the end. And we're actually approaching the 5-year anniversary of Tape Slate. So
nice.
That's, really cool.
Fantastic. So so you said you've been going 5 years and you want to keep going. So what's the long-term plan? Have you got low budget features in the mix, or do you want to sort of try and jump on the ladder, try and get into some proper big productions and work your way up?
Yeah, that's definitely the long-term plan. That's where I want to be. And that's where I know that everyone else, part of Tape Slate, wants to be. I know that everyone wants to, make it big and go on to bigger and bigger productions. And as we sort of lay the fundamental roots of, filmmaking and, with projection, doing very well on the internet.
Yeah.
And us honestly just learning a lot from it and, figuring out a lot of things that we did right and a lot of things that we could work on. We just want to keep moving forward. I want to, work with other people and I want to sort of build up the ladder and all that stuff. But I feel like Tape Slate will always be a part of my filmmaking journey. Even if I'm fortunate enough to work on feature films someday, like I feel like Tape Slate will follow me even to then. Tape Slate, we are wanting to make, some feature films as well. I mean, that's the end game for, Tape Slate, is to kind of get to that point, to, make Tape Slate Productions that household name where hopefully it's like A24, where people are like, we have a bunch of teams of directors and actors and lots of different things. But obviously that if that were to happen, if, we were to be fortunate enough for that to happen, we're talking years. But to answer the question, of course, we would work with other people and we would, want to just climb the ladder and keep growing as a company and, as a business as well. And as far as this year goes, we actually, like I said, we're doing a little short, Sign Wars 3, which, it's definitely a step down from projection as far as like characters go. Like it's obviously not going to be like a 36-minute drama, thriller, horror thing, but it's going to be a fun ride. I'm excited for everyone to see it. But then, after that, as far as the next thing that is not sci-fi or, not any of those other types of genres, I am also currently working on a drama as well, Reflex. And we're hoping that to come out in the fall. It's a very personal story, not necessarily about my personal experiences, but it's one of those things where we're really wanting to go all out with this film. And it's essentially just, I don't want to say too much about it, about the plot or anything, but starring Tucker Vaughn and someone else who we haven't cast yet, but it's going to be, about 2 recovering drug addicts and their story from start to end. And, it's a drama. So I'm really excited to do that one. After Sign Wars 3 is all done, that's when we'll go full, force towards the next one. And, I'm really, really excited to hit the ground running on that one, just because it's, there's a lot of fun things that we want to do with that. And there's a lot of things that I feel like will touch a lot of viewers. And, it's very important. If anyone watches any of the films and gets any sort of sentiment from it, that changes the way that we make them. And it makes us feel, very accomplished. I mean, that's what we're really working towards.
Sure.
To entertain people and to, primarily make everyone feel great when they're watching the films. And that's what I feel like Reflex will not necessarily feel great, but it will definitely, bring out the emotions for sure. So I'm very excited for people to see that and sort of hopefully relate to the characters and, pull some things that can make themselves better, like I'm really excited for that opportunity.
Fantastic. So who are the people that you need to meet to make your future projects become a reality?
One of the biggest things is just collaborating with bigger filmmakers. I know I had mentioned previously, it's important to climb the ladder and try to make sure that you're doing as well as you can every single step of the way and that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
I would love to hook up with some local Nashville talent, do some collaborations with film and just keep making projects over and over again and just build off the last. And I'm really excited for all those opportunities to come as well. There's a friend of mine, he's doing really well at the moment. He does a lot of freelance stuff. His company, it's Moid Entertainment. They're very popular on social media platforms and all that sort of stuff. They just started out a few months ago, like really started going full force at it. They do some great stuff over there. And Austin Davenport, the owner of, or one of the heads of that company, he actually worked with me, Porter, and 2 others, Guadi Finelli and Emma Coons. We all kind of worked and created Family Business, which you can find on the Tape Slate channel as well.
Yeah, it's a nice, fun film.
Yeah, that one was exciting. And Austin, he's a very talented dude, and I really want to work with him in the future soon. I mean, just because I've worked with him in the past, and I would love to do it again because it was a great experience.
So you've done some acting work before and you've acted in your own films. Do you see a future in acting, or are you happier, behind the camera directing other people? I
started in acting. Like I said, the filming was, just kind of a pastime, back in the day. And, I sort of, grew up on those projects. I, had some good representation as well. I just grew to like behind the camera a lot more. And of course, I will occasionally step in front of the camera. Like, for Sign Wars 3, I'm going to be in front of the camera as well. I'm going to have Porter back on the project as well, which is going to be really cool. I've really just preferred to stay behind the camera, to be honest, just because I feel like there's a lot more, I can tell a better story from behind the camera, in my opinion. As a character, I'm not, actors can tell great stories and everything like that. Yeah. And, actors can really move people. But I also feel like the place that I'm best suited for is, behind the camera and, trying to move audiences that way.
Fantastic. So looking through your back catalogue of films, you've also done a lot of VFX work.
Yes.
Is that a needs must kind of thing, or have you got an actual interest in visual effects?
I do have an interest in visual effects. I have done some visual effects work just on some films, not really doing much aside from the VFX. You probably saw on IMDb Supertramp. There's a very brilliant, young filmmaker. He's older than me, but, he's, younger, starting out filmmaker as well. His name's Jacob Ferguson.
Right.
He's the director of that film, and he made that, for his senior year project in high school. He really put his heart and soul into that thing. He really wanted to make something special. He came to me and wanted me to do visual effects for the film, and, I was like, of course I will. And, I was going through a little bit of, stuff at the time, but I had to push all that stuff out to him, and I'm very proud of the way that stuff came out.
Cool.
There's a lot of stuff that goes on in the film. It's not necessarily one genre. It's an adventure film primarily. Yeah. And there's a scene where two characters are in a detention room, and he came to me and he really started to like push the limits of the visual effects that I thought I could do at the time. There were a lot of things that I thought I could do. I thought it was super bare essential, and he came to me and he said, "All right, so I have this shot. It's a shot of the camera looking out the window, and then you see an asteroid go over the entire school.
Right.
And the entire room is filled up with light." And I was like, I don't know if I can do it, but I will sure try. And, he sent me the shots, and I was like, are you kidding me? This stuff is like, this is some really intense camera work, too. It's like nothing's locked down. Everything's there. And I learned a lot with Supertramp, and I feel like that kind of made me a little bit more confident in the types of visual effects that I could do, and how the complexity can vary, and I can still kind of figure that part out. And I would do visual effects for a film someday. I really want to do all aspects of films, and I feel like a lot of filmmakers are like that as well, where they don't really want to lock down on one section. And I know to move up the ranks, you kind of have to figure out one and kind of move up, but
sure,
nonetheless, I still feel very passionate about all the aspects of film, not just the visual effects, even though I do really enjoy doing visual effects.
Amazing. So just jumping back to acting then, so you've been in your own short films. How do you balance the acting and directing?
It's a lot of rewatching, because obviously you're not behind the camera. It's a lot of rewatching, the footage, and just kind of making sure that it's how you would like it to be. There's a film on my IMDb, which is not on YouTube, even though the trailer's on YouTube, and that's a whole ordeal. It was sort of a failed production.
Okay.
Legacy. And there were just a lot of scheduling conflicts. And honestly, I feel like, so with all those sequels that I had talked about previously, I sort of was trying to build this cinematic universe through all my films, where there was a cinematic multiverse, more like, where all the films were connected in their own multiverses.
Nice.
And there was this one character that kept jumping in between all these universes. And even the film like Knock, there was just a little throwaway moment where this guy sees something random. And in Reaper, which Jacob Ferguson directed, at the very end there was a portal. There's just a whole bunch of different things, and Legacy was supposed to be the culmination of all of the films that had come prior. And this one guy who lives in this main universe jumps around to other ones and pulls people from different films. And I played a lot of characters in some other of the films, and in Quantum I play Quantum, and in Sign Wars I play myself. I'm Bryson, and there's some interesting plot points in there, and just a lot of different things, and some of the interesting dialogue that was in there, like what would happen if you pulled Quantum and then you pulled Tucker, and then you had Tucker face off with Quantum, who he thought was Bryson because they look the same. And it's just playing off with those little things. But nonetheless, that film, we really worked on that for a very long time. We started writing it and making sure that everything was perfect, and we started filming it directly after, actually a little bit before releasing Sign Wars 2. It was a really long ordeal. Then we started doing reshoots, and the reshoots weren't matching the previous stuff, so then we started reshooting the whole thing, and it was kind of a botched production, to be honest. And I'm really a little disappointed with the way that whole thing turned out, especially because the trailer did really well as well. But throughout all of those films, or not all, but most of those films, I acted and directed. in, a lot of them. And it's really just a matter of, working with the cinematographer and, working on making sure that everything's set to how you like it. And then once you edit it afterwards, it's really easy to edit around some of those little mishaps that would happen with, something that you didn't necessarily watch as it was happening. So, I mean, I wouldn't necessarily recommend acting and directing. It's definitely, it's a lot to bite off and chew.
Yeah.
For sure. But, it's definitely a fun experience for sure.
That's cool. So, on the subject of cinematic universes and stuff, is that where you see your films going, or do you like the idea of this film is its own thing?
It can be, cinematic multiverse, and then sometimes things can be on its own, but I feel like it's kind of one and the same. It's kind of like the Pixar theory, where, people are saying, all these films are connected and all this stuff is this way and all this stuff is this way, but, in the films you don't necessarily have to acknowledge the other ones, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And I still say to this day that the legacy verse, which is, what it's called, I would still say the legacy verse still is a thing.
Yeah.
I would say, projection takes place in its own universe, and then some other films may take place in the same Earth as projection. And it's not anything that's ever going to be announced or,
sure,
like big plot twist or, played on or anything like that. But
yeah.
I mean, it is one of those things where it's still just kind of fun to think that, the multiverse is still there, and then all these films are still part of their own multiverse, whether you'd pay it off or not.
Yeah.
It's just fun to play around with that idea.
Fantastic. So to wrap things up then, everyone's got their favourite big budget films, but since this podcast veers more towards independent filmmaking, is there any indie films that have inspired you particularly, or any indie films that you think haven't got as much attention as they should have done?
There's this one film. It was filmed in Nashville, Tennessee. It's called Real Gone. You may have seen it on the Film Riot YouTube channel. And it's an indie film in that it's, not enormous budget or anything like that. But it has gotten a lot of praise on the internet, and I feel like everyone should go give that a watch, just because, Seth Worley, he did a phenomenal job on that film. I really think everyone should go see that, just because, I mean, it's a perfect way to kind of bring in heart, drama, soul, and comedy all into one film.
Cool. And,
do a really, really good job. I don't know if you've seen it or not, but
no,
yeah, it's called Real Gone on the Film Riot YouTube channel, Triune Films. So, I'd definitely give that a watch.
Yeah, that sounds really good. I'll definitely track that down and check it out. So, if people want to get in touch with you, what's the best way?
You can go ahead and go to my website, www.tapeslateproductions.com. And you can also contact me through email at tapeslate@gmail.com. And Tapeslate is spelled Tapeslate @gmail.com. Also, you can follow the Tapeslate Instagram, which is just Tapeslate Productions.
Fantastic. Well, thanks for jumping on this podcast. It's been great to chat with you.
Yeah, no problem at all, dude.
And I look forward to checking out Reflex when that drops. And thanks to you for listening if you've made it this far. Much appreciated. Just a reminder, if you want to check out Projection, it's available on the Tape Slate YouTube channel. If you want to check out more episodes of IndieFilmopolis, it's available on SoundCloud, iTunes, Spotify and YouTube, and probably a whole bunch of other places too. On our YouTube channel, we actually have individual playlists for each episode, with the short films, trailers and the clips relating to everything we talked about in each episode. So if anything piques your interest, you can just head over there and take a look. If you'd like to get in touch with us with your own short films or indie film recommendations, or you just want to follow our updates and posts, you can reach us on Instagram, Facebook and Twitter. Just search for IndieFilmopolis. You can also find myself on Twitter, Facebook and Instagram by searching for Philm Maker, PHILMMAKER. And you can follow the progress of our very own low-budget flick, Almost Enemy, on Facebook and Twitter. Just search for Almost Enemy Movie. That's it. Thanks again for listening, and hopefully we'll catch you next time.